She was either loved or hated.
She effectively communicated the evils of slavery to the entire nation.
I would say one word would be empathetic. She had an ability to help people from different parts of society to learn how to empathize with one another.
One woman was on a mission to take a stand in history and to rock the foundations of a 225-year-old institution. This woman stood up for the rights of humanity no matter what others thought of her. She was one of many who sparked the flame that started the Civil War, putting an end to slavery and transforming a nation. Catalyst for the Oppressed, Harriet Beecher Stowe. Man enslaving man, this is deep in the history of mankind, deep in the history of this great nation. Slavery is entrenched in the history and the economic growth of this country. Yale professor David Blight compares the northern and southern states' economic pursuits when he states, by 1860, there were more millionaires, slaveholders all, living in the lower Mississippi Valley than anywhere else in the United States. In the same year, the nearly 4 million American slaves were worth some $3.5 billion, making them the largest single financial asset in the entire U.S. economy, worth more than all manufacturing and railroads combined. So, of course, the war was rooted in these two expanding and competing economies, but competing over what? This is the world that Harriet Elizabeth Beecher Stowe was born into on July 14, 1811. She was the seventh of Lyman Beecher's 13 children. Sadly, a few months after Harriet's fourth birthday, her mother died of tuberculosis. As her older sister, Catherine assumed the responsibilities of her mother. She became an important figure in Harriet's life and a major shaping influence. When Harriet was 13, she gave her life to Christ during one of her father's sermons. Her decision to follow Christ would ultimately shape the rest of her life. Harriet's father, unlike most people, believed that women should have an education, therefore his daughters did. Being successful with her studies, Harriet went on to a higher education and even taught for a number of years. While at Lane Theological Seminary, she met Calvin Ellis Stowe. The two fell in love and were married on January 6, 1836. In the summer of 1849, incidentally the same year that Harriet Tubman escaped slavery, a cholera epidemic spread like wildfire throughout Cincinnati, killing more than 100 people every day. Naturally, the disease did not bypass the Stowe household. Harriet watched as 2 of her 7 children fell deathly ill. On the brink of recovery, Stowe's youngest son took a turn for the worse. In July of that same year, he lay in bed day after day with his horrible cough racking in his chest, leaving no fluids in his little body. He tried to hold on, but his body couldn't handle it. All she could do was pray for his suffering to end. And when it did, Harriet could empathize with the loss of a child and caught a glimpse of the suffering of slave mothers. But could she even really know the depths of the pain that slave mothers felt when their children were callously sold and never heard from again? Could she stand by and let this keep happening day after day, month after month, year after year? While watching slave boats coming up the Ohio River, full of slaves to be sold at auctions, these questions swirled around in her mind. A year later, her husband accepted a position in Maine, hoping a new start would be good for the whole family. At that time, Harriet's older sister and sister-in-law encouraged her to use her writing skills to help the anti-slavery movement. At first, Harriet wrote the climax of her story after she heard the abominable and harrowing tale of a black man being whipped by 2 white men. They took turns beating, laughing, and waiting with growing pleasure at the gruesome sight. When her husband read her book, he wept. This is the climax of the book you promised Catherine. Finish the beginning, and this will be an incredible story, piercing the body, mind, and soul of all who read it.
Harriet Beecher Stowe. I think she reminds me of Martin Luther because she took something from her conscience and put it into action that impacted other people's conscience and brought in change.
Writing fiercely, she told the story of just one of the thousands who had been affected by the ineffably evil institution. Writing Uncle Tom's Cabin was a very bold and courageous thing to do at a time where women were not respected and abolitionists could be harassed by angry Southerners at any time. After her book, Uncle Tom's Cabin, was printed, it sold more than 300,000 copies in the first 3 months of being in print.
She took the story of slaves and she personalized it, and she made it real for audience throughout the United States, and she put it in that media of the day, the written word, and so that it could be spread throughout, so that people could talk about it, they could visualize it, they could understand it, and they could connect with it on an emotional level. And that is why her writing of Uncle Tom's Cabin was so effective in promoting this message in the years leading up to the Civil War.
Harriet Beecher Stowe ignited a nation when she put on paper the words of a man whose story was like so many others. The story of Uncle Tom, the story that rose from the pages of her book and educated and pricked the conscience and minds of all who read it. Author Christopher Paul Curtis states emphatically of Uncle Tom's Cabin, "It showed the horrors of slavery from the inside out and forced the nation to face the atrocities being committed." The book was entrenched in the history of America. It served as a wake-up call to many who either couldn't or wouldn't see the evil of slavery. As far as I know, pencil and paper were available to many, many white Americans during the centuries of slavery, but it appears as though Stowe was the only one who was brave enough to pick up the pen, something much mightier than the sword.
Many people just couldn't dream beyond that. And so one thing that she did with her words is she helped people to see what they could do.
It could be argued that this book helped create a moral climate in which President Lincoln could look beyond keeping the Union together and seek to do what was right for the sake of humanity. Years later, when she was invited to the White House, it is reported that upon meeting Harriet Beecher Stowe, Abraham Lincoln said, "So you're the little woman who wrote the book that started this great war." Stowe was a woman who continued to impact the lives of oppressed Americans even after the Civil War. She continued to take a stand with empowering former slaves with employment and education, as well as fighting for women's rights. She believed in the hopes set forth in the Declaration of Independence, stating, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." She believed that this was for all people. Desiring to lead by example, she employed former slaves on plantations that she purchased for the sake of creating jobs. She also started a school in her community to educate and give hope to those who had been in bonds. Harriet was an example to many people, young and old, of a godly woman who not only thought on whatever was true, noble, right, pure, lovely, and admirable, but stood up for it also. Harriet Beecher Stowe takes her place in history with those who stand up for the moral rights of humanity. She's a woman who defied the odds of the world around her and took a stand by revolutionizing the world with her words.